This past application cycle, I've read and reviewed more than 1,000 college essays. Of those 1,000 essays, more than half of them fell into one of these following traps. Today, we'll be discussing the 4 worst types of college essays, as well as how to fix them. Number 1, the bad health essay. There are actually 2 versions of the bad health essay. One is where I see students commonly talk about their own injuries, but the other is an arguably even bigger trap since it's not even about the student's own injury, but rather the injury, sickness, or loss of a family member. First things first, if this happened to you, I'm genuinely really sorry that you had to experience something like that, had to go through that. But as your virtual big brother, I also owe it to you guys to tell you the truth. And the truth is that spending 650 words talking about your problems in the Common App is, generally speaking, not a wise decision. Instead, you guys should detail the medical conditions you or your family member went through in the additional information section. That would actually be the best place to talk matter-of-factly about the extenuating circumstances you faced. That being said, if you do choose to stick with this topic, there's definitely a way to make it work. The simple, most effective way to cure the bad health essay, pun intended, is to make it bigger than yourself. Do not spend more than 25% of the essay talking about your condition. Instead, spend the overwhelming majority of your story explaining how you overcame your situation, then use your newfound growth to help others. To give you guys a real life example, one of our students a few years ago actually wrote about how he was half deaf, but this actually turned out to be a superpower since he learned to read lips better. After that, he started asking people about different problems at school, really listening to them, at least with his good ear. And then he eventually ran for student council and became class president. Using his new executive powers, he then organized social events post-COVID so that there would be more social interaction, communication, cross-pollination between these different clubs and teams. Moving on to the second issue, what we call the Braggy Leader. The pitfall here is when an entrepreneur or founder, or really any leader, essentially dumps their entire resume into a paragraph of their essay. To simply fix this, just focus on a character. Don't talk about the dozens of students you helped and just reduce them to pure numbers. Instead, hone in on one person and one situation. Bonus points if you can really articulate what you were feeling and what they were feeling too. Let's transform something like, I helped lead a team of 40 middle school volunteers and together we picked up hundreds of pounds of trash. First of all, notice how there is just no emotion to be found here. And change that to, as our bags got heavier, I noticed that Tony began to whine. But knowing that Tony was a huge fan of sea turtles, I told him how every piece of plastic he picked up actually helped save 3 turtles. And suddenly, my boy Tony was the paragon of virtue. If you learned anything from this video, it's that your essay should feature stuff not found anywhere else in your application. And one of the best ways to do that is actually by honing in on emotional examples. By the way, before I discuss the last 2 mistakes, I'd just like to share that here at Elevated, we specialize in editing college essays. So if you seriously want to present your best self to colleges and you'd like the most sensational feedback you've ever received on a piece of writing, visit www.elevated.school/editmyessay. Moving on to mistake number 3, the tortured artist. Oh man, I can't tell you how many essays I've seen where a student begins their story by saying that they were shy, nervous, afraid. Then they discovered this art, writing, drama, painting, speech, and voila, they're Aphrodite coming out of their shell. Now, to be perfectly fair, this is actually not a bad character arc, but there is a way to make it way better. You could, on the one hand, talk about how you became the activist artist. After you talk about how you yourself grew from this art form, for the first half of your essay, start explaining how you started teaching others and helping them grow too. Or on the other hand, you could talk about becoming the intellectual artist. Just start nerding out and mentioning these hyper-specific topics within an art form like painting, such as chiaroscuro or alla prima, and mention how you've spent hours not just researching these topics, but also applying them to your own work. This specific approach works wonders for UC essays and supplemental prompts, especially the ones that ask about an intellectual idea that excites you. Now that I think about it, you could also technically merge both and become the intellectual activist artist. I mean, if you have a story like that, why not? Mistake number 4 is what we call the relationship essay. What I'm about to tell you will blow your mind. Both my co-founder Jeff's essay, which was actually featured on the New York Times, as well as my own essay, which went viral on TikTok and got me into Princeton and Yale, both suffered this mistake. We spend way too much time talking about someone other than ourselves. By the way, if you want to check out my essay to see what worked versus what didn't work, check out my analysis this in this video here. So this is actually a really heavily contested and controversial point within the college admissions community. Some people argue that, it's totally fine to talk about someone else since we get to see what principles and values you admire. Fair. But then again, the more that I personally read these kinds of essays, the more that I've realized it's just generally speaking far better for students to talk about yourself as opposed to someone else. At the end of the day, college admission officers are trying to admit you, not your mom, dad, grandma, or grandpa. While it's totally okay to talk about the relationship itself, just be sure to emphasize exactly how you contributed to the relationship more than what the other person has given you. The key here is to really hone in on those little details that convey vulnerability and selflessness. For instance, if you know that your mom is tired after a long day of work, maybe you show your love by cooking the beef ragu that her mom used to make her. And if you're close with your grandpa and really admire his bravery for fighting in World War II, maybe you honor his legacy by creating a scrapbook for his birthday. Write stuff that really tugs at the heartstrings, guys. Like I mentioned before, the more emotional your story is, the better. For those of you who have made it this far, do not click away because I have an amazing example of a mind-blowingly good relationship essay written by one of our scholarship students from Kenya from just last month. Feel free to check it out here. Regardless, don't forget to subscribe and like for more content. Wishing you guys the best of luck in your college application journey. Peace!